This is Roger Hearing with the download edition of World Business Report on Friday the 30th of January. And coming up on the programme today, not quite so much growth in the US economy in 2014 as many had hoped. But we have some advice from one American city that's doing rather well.
Rather than trying to attract businesses to save you, invest in entrepreneurship, invest in local companies, invest in the quality of your community.
Also, a new way with democracy. Mongolians will be texting in their view this weekend on a major question of national direction.
It's a vote for investment, development, economic growth, high-paying jobs, and ultimately improved living standards, or less jobs, less pay.
And parents beware, toy makers are already thinking about next Christmas. But let's start with the US economy, which has been pretty successful over the last few years, leading the way back from the crash of 2008. As President Obama remarked to the British Prime Minister earlier this month, we must be doing something right. Well, the latest figures came out on Friday, and in fact, there has been a bit of a slowdown in the US. Although in the last 3 months of 2014, there was annualised growth of 2.6%, not the 3% widely expected. Overall, 2014 saw a 2.4% expansion. Employers added nearly 3 million jobs in 2014, and that's the best year in the past 15. So a lot of figures there. But what does this look like in the real economy? How about on Main Street, Oklahoma?
Oklahoma, where the wind comes sweeping down the plain, and the waving wheat can sure smell sweet when the wind comes right behind the rain.
OK, well, that's the Oklahoma Tourist Board view, but is it you're doing fine, Oklahoma, when it comes to jobs? Well, Roy Williams is president and CEO of the Greater Oklahoma Chamber of Commerce.
We probably have one of the highest growth rates in the U.S. Last year, 2014, almost a 3% year-over-year growth in what we refer to as non-farm employment. So it equated to just under 20,000 new net jobs.
What sort of jobs are they?
They're very diverse. The largest percentage growth was in construction, but also leisure hospitality was about 9%, financial activities about 5.5%. We had growth in aviation and aerospace, we had it in the energy sector, we had it in the retail sector, so very, very diverse.
Has that been the case for several years? Obviously we had the crash in 2008. I guess there was a problem then.
We've had the lowest unemployment of major metro cities in the United States for almost 4 years. We've been either number one or number two in the United States. So this has been a long-term trend.
What do you put that down to?
We've just had a very dynamic economy here. We've seen significant growth in the energy sector, in the aviation and aerospace sector, and in the bioscience sector. And those are all really, really high-paying jobs. And, of course, that in turn spurs construction, retail purchases, and creates jobs on a secondary basis like that as well.
Now, I guess, obviously, we're talking about jobs at the high end there. What about the service sector where traditionally the pay has been much lower, the conditions not so good? Are you trying to work on that as well?
We are, but it's an automatic sort of complement. When you're seeing growth in a lot of higher paying, those people end up spending that money, and they go to restaurants and they buy retail products. So they in turn create a lot of middle and lower income jobs as well.
And is it possible to improve conditions at that level? Because obviously one of the big complaints has been that the jobs in the service sector are 0 hours, or they're very, very short term, or all these kind of problems.
The sort of irony in all this is that when you have really good high-paying jobs and you have a low unemployment rate, what you tend to do is drive wages up because there becomes a lot more competition for employees. And to meet that competition, you tend to pay more and provide better benefits. So it tends to pull up the lower-paying jobs to better-paying jobs.
And what you're talking about there is what I suppose they call a virtuous circle, in a way. It's something that's producing good from good. But what is it about Oklahoma City that puts it in that position? I mean, do you have particularly employer-friendly regulations or conditions? I mean, what is it?
We went through a very severe economic recession back in the late 80s and early 90s. And there were decisions made by the business community and public elected officials in the city to really focus on changing Oklahoma City from the standpoint of quality of life, quality of opportunity. And we invested hundreds of millions of dollars, actually billions of dollars, in major infrastructure projects that the taxpayers voted to tax themselves to do. So we did really substantial initiatives, things such as building an entertainment venue downtown, building a canal downtown, dams in the river, creating an Olympic training venue, building an arena, attracting an NBA team here. We built about 15 different major projects, as well as major improvements to our education system that really changed Oklahoma City to be a talent magnet. So now the millenniums are coming here, the graduates are staying here. So we created a place where not only is it a good place to do business, but it's a good place to live, raise a family, and enjoy life. So over the last several decades, we've really transformed the city to a real new level of opportunity for the next generation of talent.
Now, there's a lot of cities, I think, that would want to be in that position. What kind of lessons should they take from your experience?
Well, the lesson I think of most value is put your future in your own hands. Everything we did, we financed locally. We didn't rely on the state government. We didn't rely on the federal government. We paid for it ourselves. So rather than trying to attract businesses to save you, invest in entrepreneurship, invest in local companies, invest in the quality of your community, and don't look for a savior. Be your own.
Roy Williams there in Oklahoma City. So how did the share markets then respond to these news features on the US economy? Jasper Lawler of CMC Markets joins me now. Jasper, I mean, pretty good news on the jobs, slightly slower in terms of the more general economy.
Yes, that's right. General improvement on the jobs front, but the overall rate of growth just slightly slipping back, but which is understandable given the real fast acceleration that we saw in the third quarter, but just slipping back a bit more than people were expecting in the fourth quarter.
And in the European area, of course, still not looking that good. Deflation deepened in January.
Well, exactly, yes. Deflation now at minus 0.6% year on year, which the further we get away from the 2% target that central banks typically aim for, the worse situation is. And so that, alongside sort of difficult political situation in Greece, there are some certain difficulties in Europe, and that's why we've seen this expanded program by the European Central Bank to really try and prop things up here.
But it doesn't seem to be working, does it?
To be honest, no. It's not probably working too well for the actual economy. The only hope is that actually through a stock market asset price type effect, that yields get pushed down, so the level of interest rates that we all pay on our mortgage and pay in order to invest in the economy is lower, and thus would encourage us to do so.
And briefly, Russia interest rates cut 17% to 15%. I guess they're trying to stir their economy as well.
Yes, I mean, the risk there is that the central bank's losing a bit of credibility, because there was a massive jump up to 17%. That was just to sort of control inflation. There was also a massive flood of money going out of the Russian economy because of these sanctions, because of the lower oil prices, which Russia really rely on oil exports for their economy, and now they've just dropped it down to 15% again.
Jasper, thanks very much indeed. Jasper Lawler there on the Dow, currently 0.4% down, 17,342. Here in London, the 100 share index down 0.9%, 67.49. You're listening to the World Business Report from the BBC World Service, and still to come, we take a look at what will be big in the world of toys this Christmas.
Stuff that is media-backed is big generally, and we saw huge success with Frozen at the back end of last year. The bits that are harder to tell are things like Crazy Looms that just pop up from nowhere, that are real playground trends.
That's all coming up in a few moments. But first, this is the latest way in which the will of the people is exercised in Mongolia. You see, it's the X Factor style. Mongolians are being asked to decide government policy by texting it in, much like TV reality shows. You see, Mongolia has a question to face up to as a nation. What it comes down to is this: whether it wants expansion at the Oyu Tolgoi giant copper mine owned by Rio Tinto or not. Well, the case for is that it could generate revenue equivalent to a third of the country's economy. The case against is that it's environmentally damaging and Mongolia isn't getting a good enough deal. Well, technically, the Prime Minister, Saikabalag Kimeris, isn't bound by the popular poll, which starts on Saturday, but it will strengthen his hand. Dale Choi is from Independent Mongolian Metals and Mining Research in Ulaanbaatar, and I asked him exactly what questions citizens would be voting on.
The government is asking citizens to provide their choice on two options for country's development. Number one is to stabilize exchange rate by resolving Oyu Tolgoi and major projects of construction and development, TT, Tawan Tolgoi, major power plants, railroads, and other major projects. Number two is reduce consumption and improve economic discipline and also stabilize exchange rate. That is the formal question.
So people will get this question coming on their mobile phones, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. All four Mongolian mobile operators will broadcast this message to every mobile number in the country. We have 3.5 million active subscribers, which is more than current 3 million citizens.
You might get more answers than there are voters, in a way.
Mobile penetration has been quite a market success in this country. Government is doing an excellent job of promoting, but some of the media has been not so cooperative, so I'm sure not everyone will vote.
And I suppose there's a risk of fraud as well, people voting many times.
Actually, the chairman of the telecommunication agency has announced that results will be supervised and validated by Ernst & Young. So my cautious expectation is that there will be very little fraud, if any.
And what's your sense about the way people will vote? I mean, what do most people think of this issue?
I think it's a common sense choice. It's a vote for investment, development, economic growth, high-paying jobs, and ultimately improved living standards or stagnating living standards, less jobs, less pay, and I think it's a very common sense choice. However, with a very particular situation with the media, and some resource nationalism, some hostility towards foreign investors, hostility towards mining. There will be part of population that will perceive this vote as voting regarding the mineral riches of Mongolia. So there could be a part of population that would like to, in misguided way, protect the mineral riches. So there could be some votes against investment, and there could be votes for this austerity, mostly driven by anti-foreign investment and anti-mining, pro-environmentalist kind of point of view.
But whatever happens, this will draw a line under it. There will be a decision now, because it's been going on for a long time, hasn't it?
Absolutely. This has been going for the last 2-3 years. The poll has been announced. There is no way back.
It's a slightly different world now, isn't it? Because copper prices have dropped quite a lot. It's not quite the money spinner it used to be.
I have never seen crisis like this. So there's been quite a double coincidence of this commodities very bad cycle and resource nationalism also in Mongolia. So this is moment of truth.
Do you think even if they go ahead with the expansion of this mine, perhaps it will not be very good economic times for Mongolia just because of the price of copper?
This is a very tiny economy, only about $12 billion economy. So a lot of market activity is founded on market confidence. And I think vote, if it is number one, which is Oyu Tolgoi and major projects of construction development, there will be a major boost of investor confidence. I think this confidence is what we need to get at least a stable national currency, because currency is very close to landmark level. We have decreasing confidence. There will be more and more national currency depreciation, and we will have more inflation and things like that.
Dale Choi in Ulaanbaatar. So it's Friday again, and just before we let you turn off your computer and pack your bags for the weekend, our traditional reminder of the week that was.
Η Ελλάδα γυρίζει σελίδα.
Greece is turning a page. Greece is leaving behind catastrophic austerity.
I think this is touch and go. It's a bit like a game of poker, really. It depends how strongly people play their hands.
Everybody knew that Apple's quarterly profits would be huge, but the figure reported by the company on Tuesday, $18 billion, far exceeded even Apple's own previews.
What Apple's done is establish a brand that people want over a phone that people want, and that's what's allowed it to continue this success when, frankly, other manufacturers are starting to struggle.
Despite her various incarnations and impressive, if improbable, career trajectory, Barbie is struggling to keep her audience interested.
I don't really like these ones because they don't have match names, they're just called Barbies.
So, the victory of the Greek anti-austerity party Syriza in their elections, Apple posting the biggest quarterly profits in business history, and Mattel trying to rebrand Barbie dolls for a more superhero age. Well, to chew over all that, I was joined by Diane Brady of Bloomberg Businessweek in New York, and here in London by Robert Cole of Reuters Breaking Views. Well, Greece is beginning negotiations with Eurozone officials. Does Diane see an easy way out of the dispute over the austerity package imposed on Athens?
I think that people are talking a lot about a hybrid right now. I go back to what Larry Summers said at Davos. If New Jersey had used the dollar but wasn't part of the fiscal union of the U.S., it would be in exactly the same situation as Greece. So I think people understand that there needs to be some debt relief here. Now, whether or not the rest of the agenda is worthy, I think that's probably not the case. But I think that certainly there's been a lot of support for the idea of some European debt conference. But the latest that I saw, of course, is it's being rejected. And who's rejecting it? Once again, it's Germany, which personally I find ironic since, West Germany's creditors forgave half of its debt after the war.
Well, indeed, and I think a lot of Greeks find that ironic as well, as even call, I think, for some sort of further reparations for what happened in the 1940s. But, Robert, do you see a way forward at all coming out of this?
I do, actually. I'm surprisingly optimistic about it, really. I mean, I think it would be foolish to think anything other than the risks in the Eurozone, and particularly with regard to the tensions between Greece and Germany, or anything but higher. And those risks are only, if you like, inflated by, I think, by the relative inexperience of the Greek politicians. I mean, they're academics, actually, who've just become politicians in the last week. So I wouldn't want to sound complacent at all, but actually I think that there is a good chance that they're changing the course of the debate and really challenging the notion that the established economic and fiscal and monetary sort of mores are the ones to command the situation.
And what's real is that they've got a popular mandate. That's the big thing, that they can't, it's huge. They have enormous support from their own people.
That's absolutely right. I actually think that the ball is rather more in Germany's court than Greece's. And Germany, together with the rest of the Union, the rest of the Eurozone and the Union, actually, has to think quite carefully about how it wants to structure its economy and whether it wants to take it forward. The other thing I think it's important to step back on, so people say that there's this tension between the economics and the politics and the reform is necessary, and of course that's true, but actually, we're 5 or 10 years into this Eurozone crisis, and I think we should accept that actually the Eurozone is showing itself to be immensely strong to have withstood all these pressures, and while it's far from perfect, I think it's quite a long way from failing.
Well, let's talk about something that is doing the exact opposite of failing, which is Apple, which posted, Diane, as I'm sure you noticed this week, the biggest quarterly profit ever that there has ever been. I mean, we all stand in awe, but is there more to it than that? I mean,
I just contributed to their first quarter sales by buying 6 Plus and a computer yesterday. So almost 70% of the revenue essentially came from the iPhone. So that's something that does give some people pause. But let's face it, it's been a big hit. It's been a big innovation. And next up is Apple Watch. And I think the question a lot of people have, is that going to really sort of keep the momentum going, or is Apple going to be vulnerable if too much is weighted on the smartphones?
Yeah, because wearable technology hasn't taken off perhaps in the way that some people thought it would. But, Rob, it does seem, as Dan says, it's the iPhone. It's this particular iPhone 6 in China, and China is the interesting thing in this. So much of the profits does seem to come from that.
Yeah, well, it's a very large market which is opening and giving not only Apple but plenty of other companies a good stream of income for now and into the future. I mean, yes, you talk about the doubts about the new technologies, the wearable stuff, but I think they said precisely the same thing about the iPhone. Would it be able to do that, having come off, the computer technology that they have? I think the remarkable thing about Apple is not just that its technology is very good, but they've managed to create this sort of brand value. Most products, actually, and most technology products usually rapidly get devalued because they're copied and made cheaper. And the remarkable thing about Apple is it's hung on to that.
Something else was brought up in the light of what happened this week. Tax. Well, Diane, you know that Apple do not have a reputation for paying a lot of taxes. I'm sure they pay what they are legally required to do, but there is certainly here in Europe, and I think to some extent in the US, a sense that this company should be paying more.
And tech companies writ large, I mean, that's been one of the big debates in the US. It is not alone. There's a lot of incentive to essentially have a lot of your operations overseas and not pay those U.S. taxes. But Apple, especially because it is the biggest, it's the most successful, it definitely is the poster child for that.
Let's finish up with something that is not a financial success at the moment, but we did hear this week that the Barbie doll is, well, they're trying to make it more, the doll's more action-oriented, more like superheroes, and that this is the way to try and get them back into small girls' pockets and indeed get their parents to pay for them, I dare say. Diane, is it going to work?
You know, Barbie has struggled. This is a brand that's more than a century old, and it doesn't really resonate, especially when they do the DVDs with girls today in terms of the superhero stuff and in terms of the empowerment stuff. Just because you put Barbie in a doctor's gown, for example, if she still has a big bust and the gown is pink, it doesn't really sort of have the same impact as something else. So Mattel, you know, obviously it's still a powerhouse brand, but I think that the zeitgeist has turned against Barbie somewhat, and certainly a lot of parents have issues with giving their daughters those toys now.
Well, Robert, I'm guessing you've never purchased a Barbie.
Well, that's not entirely true, actually. I do speak as the father of 3 gorgeous daughters, and I have to say that I think that they've all had tremendous fun with dolls of one sort or another, and there are baskets full of dressing up clothes.
Lots of pink around, I imagine.
And a tremendous amount of pink. And I think quite consciously I've tried not to bring any of my children up in any kind of stereotypical kind of way. I have 2 daughters who are very pink, if you like, and another who plays football, soccer. But the point is that there does seem to, in my own personal experience, to be a great attraction among small children to playing with dolls. And I think that will underscore a decent future for Mattel.
Nothing wrong with playing with dolls. But whether we want Super Sparkle as our next big hero, that remains to be seen.
Diane Brady and Robert Cole playing nicely. Well, talking of toys, we may be only 1 month of 2015 so far, but toy manufacturers and buyers already looking far ahead to next Christmas. The UK market's worth $4.5 billion, so it's pretty crucial that the industry spots the trends and doesn't miss out on the next big thing. Now, one of the most important days in their calendar is the Toy Fair at London's Kensington Olympia, where hundreds of companies vie for business. Our lucky reporter, Elizabeth Hodson, went along.
The event is all about putting your product out there on display and getting the buyers interested. There are robots, cars and cuddly toys as far as the eye can see.
Lego is here. Hey, kids, look! A whole new world to build.
Lego is one of the biggest players in the toy market. Fiona Wright is General Manager of Lego UK, and I want to know what she thinks will be big this Christmas.
We know that Lego City is such a strong performer that will just continue to sell really well and appeal to the children's imagination. And then, of course, we've got the fantastic Star Wars movie launching at the end of 2015, and we have a fantastic range of toys to support that.
Of course, all of the toy manufacturers here need someone to buy what they're selling. Hamleys is one of the biggest names in the toy selling business. They've been going since 1760. Laura Olver is the buying director. Laura, how do you choose between all of the products for sale?
We just get out there and we've got to keep our eyes open the whole time, and toy fairs like this are brilliant for us. They give a real window into what's going on.
What do you think will be big this Christmas?
Stuff that is media-backed is big, generally, and we saw huge success with Frozen, for example, at the back end of last year. The bits that are harder to tell are things like crazy looms that just pop up from nowhere, that are real playground trends.
What makes a great toy?
It's all about play, and play is so international and so multilingual, and it can be for any age and either gender, something that just really captures the imagination of the children.
Switch on your vehicle. Practice. Position vehicles on the starting grid and press the check button. 3, 2, 1.
toy fair wouldn't be complete without a car racing game. Richard North is the founder of Wow Stuff, which invents products for big companies. His latest invention, Real FX, takes racing to a new level, starting with the track.
It's completely flat and it's printed with an ink that's in a gradient, so you can see it going from black to white. What the car is doing is it's sensing exactly where it is on that track, and it does that by using artificial intelligence.
Lap 4.38, lap record.
I've walked into the middle of the exhibition hall and I'm at a very traditional game store. It's called Gibson's and it's been going for nearly 100 years. Kate Armitage is part of the original family, and Kate, you're the fourth generation, aren't you?
I am, yes. Yep, it was my great-grandfather that founded the business in 1919.
In the middle of your stall, on a white medical trolley, is a full-size torso. Why do you have this?
We've used it to promote our My Body puzzle. And so our little Dr. Reuben is here because he wants to be a doctor and he knows all about the body.
You're very young for a doctor. How old are you?
I'm 7.
We're going to have a race to see who can put the correct body parts in the body the quickest, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. 3, 2, 1, go!
Right, OK. One of the lungs has just fallen out.
That happens all the time, of course. Elizabeth Hodson there on a really tough assignment, and we know there's going to be a body puzzle in her stocking in just 11 months' time. Anyway, that's pretty much it from World Business Report. Don't forget to podcast the programme, always available from iTunes or on the BBC Business page on Facebook. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to World Business Report from the BBC World Service. For more news and analysis, download Business Matters, our daily hour-long mix of current affairs and debate, published at breakfast time in Asia and Europe. We debate key trends in the worlds of work, politics, technology and the environment. Find it at bbc.com/podcasts. You can also follow us and get our latest audio at twitter.com/BBC World Biz and talk to us on Facebook at facebook.com/BBC Business.
5.5%. We had growth in aviation and aerospace. We had it in the energy sector. We had it in the retail sector. So very, very diverse.
Has that been the case for several years? Obviously, we had the crash in 2008. I guess there was a problem then.
We've had the lowest unemployment of major metro cities in the United States for almost 4 years. We've been either number 1 or number 2 in the United States. So this has been a long-term trend.
What do you put that down to?
We've just had a very dynamic economy here. We've seen significant growth in the energy sector, in the aviation and aerospace sector, and in the bioscience.
This is Roger Hearing with the download edition of World Business Report on Friday the 30th of January. And coming up on the programme today, not quite so much growth in the US economy in 2014 as many had hoped. But we have some advice from one American city that's doing rather well.
Rather than trying to attract businesses to save you, invest in entrepreneurship, invest in local companies, invest in the quality of your community.
Also, a new way with democracy. Mongolians will be texting in their view this weekend on a major question of national direction.
It's a vote.
0.6%, not the 3% widely expected. Overall, 2014 saw a 2.4% expansion. Employers added nearly 3 million jobs in 2014, and that's the best year in the past 15. So, a lot of figures there. But what does this look like in the real economy? How about on Main Street, Oklahoma?
The wind comes sweeping down the plain, and the waving wheat sure smells sweet when the wind comes right behind the rain.
OK, well, that's the Oklahoma.
For investment, development, economic growth, high-paying jobs, and ultimately improved living standards, or less jobs, less pay.
And parents beware, toy makers are already thinking about next Christmas. But let's start with the US economy, which has been pretty successful over the last few years, leading the way back from the crash of 2008. As President Obama remarked to the British Prime Minister earlier this month, we must be doing something right. Well, the latest figures came out on Friday, and in fact, there has been a bit of a slowdown in the US. Although in the last 3 months of 2014, there was annualised growth of 2%. Tourist board view, but is it you're doing fine, Oklahoma, when it comes to jobs? Well, Roy Williams is President and CEO of the Greater Oklahoma Chamber of Commerce.
We probably have one of the highest growth rates in the U.S. Last year, 2014, almost a 3% year-over-year growth in what we refer to as non-farm employment. So it equated to just under 20,000 new net jobs.
What sort of jobs are they?
They're very diverse. The largest percentage growth was in construction, but also leisure hospitality was about 9%, financial activities about 5%.